The Preludes are some of Chopin's most famous collection of piano compositions, and revered by many musicians throughout the world. Despite the term prelude, these songs are not introductory to any other piece, but are instead emotional and cyclic songs that stand alone. The beauty of many of these preludes is the intense stories that shine through them. The Prelude in D-flat major, or Raindrop Prelude as nicknamed by his close lover George Sand, houses a powerful, passionate story. Despite Chopin's reluctance for any nicknames, it is aptly called the Raindrop Prelude, as one can hear the elements of a storm, clouds coming and passing. It cycles through periods of pleasant beauty to startling darkness. In many senses, it is a metaphor of the battle between light and darkness. It parallels much of the patterns of life, and, not surprisingly, the life of Chopin as he wrote the piece. In the years 1836 through 1838, and likely earlier, Chopin began to write these pieces in the island of Majorca, accompanied by his romantic partner George Sand and her 3 children. He displayed a great respect and admiration for the works of Bach, slipping some of his ideas into his compositions. At first, his life on the island in the warm weather was something of a joyous dream. He described it as a most wonderful life. All changed when the cold came, and, with it, the extraction of tuberculosis. His location in a damp and dark monastery did little to improve his situation, and his health continued to deteriorate for many months. It is said that he dreamt of a storm, with drops hitting his chest, that inspired Raindrop in his reflection. Years later, in 1839, he published the piece and dedicated it to a dear friend and advertiser, Camille Pleyel, among a set of 24 preludes. Today it has remained a novel piece of music, emitting strong feelings torn between the exquisite darkness and tranquil calm. To create this complexity, there are numerous musical devices and techniques woven throughout the piece that establish clear themes and powerful moods that make this song so successful. This prelude is written primarily in the key of D-flat major, but as is common for many of Chopin's famous preludes, it is subject to brief modal changes to transform the sound into a melancholy tone. The left hand maintains a steady bass note, forming a parallel shape on the top part of the left hand with the right hand to create an intricate layer. The piece begins primarily with the A theme. This is the introduction to the story that Chopin tells and begins with a light, pleasant tone in D-flat major. It is significant to note the consistent eighth notes in the bass part, as one could speculate that this is a reference to rain falling. The beginning phrase, measures 1 through 4, is answered with a parallel period in measures 4 through 8. The harmonization is primarily based on the arpeggiation of a 1 chord and the progression to a 7 chord before stepping back into the 1 chord. The movement between these chords creates the aural tug-of-war in our mind. Then a new section AB is introduced. This one adds more flavor by introducing a small minor section. For example, in measures 11 through 12, while mirroring the eighth notes, it briefly jumps into the key of A-flat minor by using a minor 5 chord and adding a C-flat before returning to the original key. Similarly, in measure 17, it jumps into the key of B-flat minor by using the minor 6 chord consisting of B, D-flat, and F. Unlike section A, the bass accompaniment contains a more contrary motion and dynamic contour. These minor sequences could be interpreted as the idea Chopin developed of darkness and death being subtly pressed into the joy we may feel. The A theme is extended in measure 27 as we see. There are chromatic embellishments you will hear, and when you feel the end of the phrase is coming, it instead bumps back to a 5 chord, creating a half cadence. This new section continues to have the eighth notes in the bass part, but it transitions into a darker theme, B, measures 28 through 60 approximately. This is in the key of C sharp minor, the parallel minor of D flat major we heard in the beginning. In this section, the chords primarily used, as is common in classical music, bounce between the 1 and 5 chord. This section is the most expansive of the piece and contains many miniature themes. Section BA begins with the A flat drops, now G sharps in the new key, in the left hand, in the right hand, while the left hand plays the melody in dark chords. The static eighth notes make in the right hand make the shape oblique. One can feel the tension building as it as it crescendos into the climax section. The climax of the piece, accentuated in the beginning chords in the right hand, begins in the very brief E major mode before returning to the C sharp minor mode, adding to the sense of passion, energy, and darkness assisted by the fortissimo dynamic markings. It feels as though the height of the song suggested by BA thunders down in this section. It begins to pound out the relative major chord of E and deceptively bouncing back into a minor 6 chord to hug on to the original key, using a 2 diminished chord and flavor. Some might argue that this could be actually in the key of A flat minor, ending the phrase on tonic instead of on a 6 chord, as I had just suggested. Next, we move to the BC section. This transitional theme contains more tensions than any other part of the piece. The tension primarily exists in the right hand chords accompanying the drops, and gradually decrescendoing down. The tension builds the dark tone and anxiety, especially as it briefly tugs away into G sharp major with the A sharp suspensions in measures 73 through 74, gradually dying away. The chords here are sticky, comprising of a C sharp major 7 chord, F sharp minor, or a 4 chord, and even hovers to the 7 diminished chord before returning to the G sharp major again. The point of all these sticky chords is to maintain the tension as it drives the piece on to its traditional section. In measure 75, Chopin writes a G flat, and it jumps back into the key of D flat major, setting up the stage to return to the primary theme of A. As it settles back into the familiar setting, you will notice changes. This is actually a modified or A1 prime section, as it differs from the beginning to lead to the conclusion of the prelude. A chromatic embellishment in major 79 adds to the sense of building towards a dramatic ending. The extension of A towards the end begins in measure 82 with the treble part soloing and dramatic descending quarter notes before returning to the flowing eighth note A drops. The period gradually decrescendos and for a final dramatic touch ends in a 7/1 perfect authentic cadence. The storm has, at last, died away. If you'd like to learn more about Raindrop Prelude, I left you a bunch of my references and what I used to research. And I also included the version that I included in this slide, the URL, if you'd like to listen to that again. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for listening. I hope I was able to teach you a little more about this piece.